Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the blessed one, the worthy one, the supremely enlightened one. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Let us also pay our homage to our teacher, Most Venerable Kiribati Jnanananda Thero, for teaching us the sublime teachings of Gautama Buddha. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay, meritorious devotees. We as humans are very lucky, okay, to be born in the human world. Actually, you know, the Buddha has taught us this is a long journey in the samsara, that we are all travelers in a long journey, samsaric journey, with no discernible beginning. Because Buddha, with his qualities, his realization, because he is Samma Sambuddha, perfectly self-enlightened being, there is no end, like there is no limit to his skills. Like he can, for example, he can reflect manifold past births, and there is no cap to the extent to which he can recollect these past births of himself and other beings as well. And Buddha said, having done so, that you can't find a discernible beginning, cannot be discerned, can't say that is where it all began. So there's a long history for each and every one of us. So we've been faring in the samsara many years, incalculable. So it is rarely that we are reborn as a human or a deva. So a good rebirth is extremely rare. So this is a blessing, this life that we have now. Because, you know, as humans, as people, we always have regrets, no? We have problems in life. And we are easily taken down with problems, certain situations, and we get upset. But compare ourselves to other beings in this world, the animal world, the ghost world, the hell worlds, how much suffering there is. So we are blessed in this life. So every day when we wake up, if we can think how fortunate we are that we were not born among animals. We were not born in the ghost world or the hell worlds for that matter. Isn't that true? Because when a person passes away in this life, all that doors, all the entrances to all those worlds are open. You never know where you will be born. Think of the animal realm, how many types, kinds of animals are there? Any of those births you could have had in the past life, but you came to the human world. So aren't you fortunate in that respect? You may have problems in life. There may be tough times, but every day when you wake up and you could think and reflect upon the fact, I was born in the human world. And also, not only that, you were very fortunate to learn a teaching. Come across the teachings of the Buddha. That actually tells you this fact, that you have come in a lone samsaric journey. Then there are the other worlds that a person can be born. There is a rebirth after this world. All these things, you should not take these things for granted. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Don't take these things for granted. Recently, a certain foreigner came here to ordain. He want to ordain as a monk. Just like any of us, we get foreigners also. We have foreigners who have ordained with us in Mahaminal. So he was very eager to come here and practice the teachings of the Buddha, to live a monk's life. He gave up all his household life, the job he was doing, whatever wealth, property he had, he shared them with his friends, relatives, and he came here in a hurry. And he was here for a month or so. It seemed he was happy. He loved each day, and he said, every day is an experience, a new experience. And day by day, I am growing in. My happiness is growing. My joy is growing. And of course, he was happy. But here, suddenly he said, I have to leave. Why? Because he said, there is certain thing that I cannot wrap my head around. Like, he couldn't come to terms with certain fact that he said he could not believe in rebirth. He could not believe in a rebirth. He said, like, of course, for the most part, I can believe in the teachings. I love the teachings of the Buddha, but the rebirth, the thing that we are again reborn, that I can't believe. Why? It's not tangible. It's not something. It has to be believed. You have to believe, and you have to practice. Once you practice the path, there is a certain stage where you can actually gain that knowledge. What do you call that gain? Chutupapata jnana, no? The knowledge of passing and rebirth of things. But before that, what should you have to do? You have to have faith in the teachings of the Buddha. There has to be faith. So you have this faith, no? Don't you? You believe in the rebirth. So aren't you fortunate in that respect? That is why believing in rebirth, believing in next world, believing there is a special person as father and mother, you believe in merits, believing there are good results of your good actions, believing there are arahants, there are Samma Sambuddhas who realized the teachings, realized the nature of the world and taught it. Believing there's mother and father as special people. This is right view, no? The mundane right view. So don't you have it? You do. So in that respect, you are very fortunate to have that mundane right view, because that is the beginning. That is the base upon which you can build your spiritual path. That is where the spiritual growth begins. But had he also been patient, and there are things you can practice, no? Even if you didn't believe in a rebirth, loving kindness, compassion, all these things. Even if you did not believe in a rebirth, if you do good in this life, it's a win-win situation, no? Of course, you'll have a good rebirth thing. But what I wanted to say is that we are very fortunate that we have mundane right view. We know this is a samsaric journey. We believe the words of the Buddha. And the more and more we learn these suttas, it becomes more and more clear to us that indeed the Buddha's realization is true, because it is something we can experience in this life. So in this way, we have to see how fortunate we are. Then only that happiness will help you to move forward in the path, in your spiritual journey, even when you are down, even when things are tough in your life. You can keep moving forward if you have this faith in the teachings of the Buddha. So today also, I thought, therefore, Now we are in Sugati, no, a good destination. But there is no guarantee that we will be born in a good destination in the next world. But if you have wholeheartedly gone for refuge to the triple gem, and if you are living a virtuous life, then surely you will have a good rebirth in the heavenly world. So that our target should be to elevate this status, this life we have now, to better rebirth. That is to be reborn in the heavenly world, all the Brahma world for that matter. So this is a nice sutta. And the name of the sutta is Deva Pada Sutta, meaning the divine footsteps. In this sutta, Buddha explains the steps to the divine world. So if you have these divine footsteps in your life, that means after passing away from this life, you will be reborn among the Devas. You will be born in the Devas world, among the deities. So the name of the sutta is Divine Footsteps, Deva Pada Sutta. So this is how the sutta begins. There, at that time, Buddha was living in Savatthi. So he addresses the monks and said, because there are these 4 divine footsteps of the Devas for the purification of beings who have not been purified, for the cleansing of beings who have not been cleansed. What for? So if a being has these footsteps in his life, it helps him to cleanse himself, purify himself, and also to be reborn among the Devas. So Buddha says, what are they? What for? Buddhe avecca pasadena samannagato hoti. Which means because here a noble disciple possesses steadfast confidence in the Buddha. Steadfast, unshakable, unwavering confidence in the Buddha. That is the first quality, or the first divine footstep. What is the second? Dhamme avecca pasadena samannagato hoti. The disciple has steadfast confidence, unshakable, unwavering confidence in the Dhamma, the teachings of the Buddha. That's the second step. Third is, you know what is third? Third footstep? I think you can guess now. Sanghe avecca pasadena samannagato hoti. Sangha, to have confidence, unshakable confidence in the Sangha. Then Arya Kantehi Silehi Samannagato hoti. What? That is the virtue dear to the noble ones. A noble disciple possesses the virtue. So it is explained here, the virtue divine dear to the noble ones, that is unbroken, untorn, unblemished, unmottled, freeing, praised by the wise, ungrasped, leading to concentration. So now today, normally you observe the 5 precepts. So once you observe the 5 precepts, then you have to be mindful that you do not break the precepts. You have to uphold those precepts with respect. When you take up the precepts, you should have respect for the precepts and refrain from breaking the precepts. That's the necessity there. Because some people, once they take up the precepts, they have doubts then. Then with doubts, there comes regrets. They doubt whether I have broken the precept. Like they overthink the matter. If I do this, is it stealing? Likewise, when you think it in unwisely, then it becomes a burden for that person. and then you have regrets whether you have broken the precept or not. That's not how you should. There has to be respect. You have to be respectful of the precepts. And then when you have respect, you are mindful that you do not break the precepts. So that is why it says unbroken, untorn, unblemished, unmottled. So you are fully focused to preserve the purity of your precepts, virtue. And here in the Poedes, you observe 8 precepts and you emulate the Arahants. When you are emulating the Arahant, it means you should keep the precepts to a greater extent where you practice sense restraint, like the Arahants did. Again, you do with respect. The respect has to be there. Mindfulness, respect, effort, or else you cannot uphold the precepts. Because normally you are used to eating afternoon. If you forget, if you are not mindful, you just maybe open the fridge and take something and have until later you remember. If you are not mindful, that can happen because these are things we normally routine things in the day you do, and then only you are reminded of the precepts. So there has to be mindfulness. There has to be the respect. Then you can practice the precepts in a manner where it is unblemished. So these things, when these 4 qualities actually we discussed here, unshakable confidence in the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, and the virtue dear to noble ones, you achieve this when you become a stream entrant. Until that, our confidence in the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha is not unwavering. It's not unshakable or steadfast. It can waver until you have entered the stream. That is why when you are called a stream entrant. That is a very specific attainment. Then there is wisdom, and you will never have doubts of the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, and there will be steadfast confidence, and the virtue will never be broken. That is why it said, then it is unbroken, untorn, unmottled, and unblemished, pure virtue. You gain that state when you become stream entrant. Until then, you build upon this quality. You have confidence in the Buddha now as disciples, confidence in the Dhamma. We have, no? We have that confidence in the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, and we also practice the precepts. So that one day we can have steadfast confidence, triple J. And the virtue that is unblemished, unmottled, and that will not be broken again. You'll never break a precept thereafter when you become a stream entrant. Not even for your life. You will not steal. You will not kill, engage in sexual misconduct. You will not lie or take intoxicating drinks or drugs. That is the nature of a person who has realized the Dhamma. Okay? So that is the sutta. That is the Devapada Sutta. These are the 4 divine tracks of the Devas for the purification of beings who have not been purified, for the cleansing of beings who have not been cleansed. Now we will discuss each of these things. So first quality is to have steadfast confidence in the Buddha. What does it mean to have confidence in the Buddha? It means to believe in what the Buddha realized. So what are the things Buddha realized?
What the Four Noble Truths?
Huh?
The Four Noble Truths?
Yeah, the 4 Noble Truths is things Buddha realized. And he taught the 4 Noble Truths so that others can also realize. Actually, everything we find in the suttas in the Sutta Pitaka, the discourses, the canonical discourses, that's the Buddha's realization. If you read the sutta and you believe in that content you find in the sutta, that means what? That means you have confidence in the Buddha. That means you have confidence in his qualities. You believe he is an Arahant, a Samma Sambuddha. Likewise, you believe in the qualities. Because you can see these qualities embodied in the suttas. When you read the sutta, you see these Buddha has these qualities. You can learn about these qualities. And you learn about the realization of the Buddha. That is why confidence is saddhahati tathagatasya bodhi. To believe in the realization of the Buddha is confidence, faith. So, in the Anamatagga Sutta, Anamatagga Sangyutta, we have some suttas like when Buddha discussed the sansaric journey. There is one sutta where he says, he was in Savatthi in the Jetas Grove. Buddha said, monks, transmigration has no known beginning. That means this journey in the sansara, there is no known beginning, a discernible beginning to that. No first point is found of sentient beings roaming and transmigrating. Hindered by ignorance and fettered by craving, they wander in samsara. And here Buddha says, suppose a person was to strip all the grass, twigs, branches and leaves in India. So you cut down all the branches, trees in India, gather them together into one pile and chop them each into 4-inch pieces. Think if you cut down all the trees in India and you take 4-inch pieces, chop them into small pieces, just 4-inch in size. They lay them down saying, then you keep them aside saying, this is my father. This is my mother. Then this is my grandmother. You leave aside another piece. This is my great-grandmother. And the mother of great-grandmother. Likewise, you can do it continuously. Here Buddha says, this is my mother, this is my grandmother. Then in this manner, when you keep aside small pieces, few inches, 4 inches, just 4 inches, there will come a time, here Buddha says, the grass, sticks, branches and leaves of India would run out. Before that person's mothers and grandmothers come to an end in the samsara. That much of a lineage, a history is there. Why is that, Buddha said? Because there is no first point to this journey in the samsara. Now this is whose words? My words or the Buddha's words? It's the words of the Buddha. And if you believe in this, that is what? That is having confidence in the Buddha. That's what it means. To have full confidence, wholehearted confidence in the Buddha. Then of the earth, Buddha said, again he talks about this sansaric journey, the wandering without a beginning point. And Buddha says, suppose a person was to make the whole earth into clay balls. You take the whole mass, the earth, and you make small clay balls, the size of the jujube seeds. That means very small seeds. They lay them down saying, this is my father, this is my grandfather. In this manner, all the clay balls you made up of the whole earth will come to an end. But still, not the fathers and grandfathers. So if a person believes in it, what is that? This is the Buddha's realization. No one else saw this before the Buddha. So to believe in this Dhamma is having confidence in the Buddha. That is what we call Saddha. Then there's another sutta. In this sutta, Buddha said, monks, again this sansaric journey, there's no beginning. What do you think? Buddha asked the question from the monk, which is more, the mother's milk you were drunk while roaming and wandering in this samsara for such a very long time, or the water in the 4 great oceans? What is more, the milk you have drunk in the samsaric journey, or the 4 waters in the 4 great oceans? Then the monks reply, as we understand the Buddha's teachings, the mother's milk we drunk while roaming and wandering in samsara is greater than the waters of the four oceans. Imagine how many, now think how much milk did you drink in this life? Huh? It's not that much. Only few years you drink mother's milk. But if it is more than the waters of the four great oceans, imagine the lives you have lived in the human world alone. And the birth in the human world is rare. Most of the time you are born in the four bad destinations. So imagine the length of this journey. It's a rare occurrence to be born as a human. Even still you have drunk water than that of the four great oceans. And there is this Pabbata Sutta, a mountain. Here Buddha said, he said, the monks went, one monk went to the Buddha, and Buddha, because he said we have passed many eons in the samsara, so he wanted to know the length of an eon, time. He asked, how long is an eon from the Buddha? Then Buddha said, monk, an eon is so long, it's not easy to calculate how many years, how many hundreds or thousands years it lasts. Then he asked Buddha, then if you can't say this much of years are there for an eon, can you give a simile? Then Buddha said, yes, of course, it's possible. And Buddha gives this simile. Suppose there was a huge stone mountain, a league long. League means a yojana, that is 10 kilometers rough, 10 kilometers long, 10 kilometers wide, and height also 10 kilometers. So there are no cracks or holes. So it's a whole mass of rock, a solid mass. And as each century passed, someone would stroke it with a fine cloth from Kasi. You take a very fine cloth, and every 100 years you stroke it only once. By this means, the huge stone mountain would be worn away before the eon comes to an end. Imagine, you know, we have, as monks, we have the alms bowl now. Every day we wipe this alms bowl. After we have Pindapata, you might have seen. But the same alms bowl, we can use it all the monk life, and it would not be worn away. But we are talking of a solid mass of rock, 10 kilometers height, breadth, and width. And every 100 years you use a soft cloth. And in that manner, there will come a day that it is totally worn away, but still the eon would not come to an end. So how many such eons, incalculable eons, we have passed in the samsara? So if a person believes in that, that means he has confidence in the Buddha. So because this is the realization of the Buddha. And there's another sutta. And here Buddha said, he addressed the monks. And he says again, there is no beginning to this sansaric journey. And Buddha said, one person roaming in this sansara for an eon would amass a heap of bones the size of this Mount Vepulla, if they were gathered together and not lost. That means there was a huge mountain. The name of the mountain was Vepulla by the side, and Buddha showed this mountain to the monks and said, if when you pass away, normally what happens when you cremate? What happens? The skeleton, it becomes soil, no? But if they did not decay, if you were to collect all the skeletons of one person wandering in the samsara for 1 year's time and amass the heap of bones, it will be huge, more bigger than the Vepulla mountain. In 1 year, we have passed to that many human lives. So it is unfathomable even for a person. But if you believe in this, it means you believe in the teachings of the Buddha. You have saddha. So that is what it means to have confidence in the Buddha. So then there are some other suttas that I want to discuss. This one, the Satya Samyutta. Now we discussed how valuable this life we have, because Buddha said, once we pass away, and the majority of us, they are born in where? In the 4 bad destinations. Here Buddha said the beings who die as humans are reborn as humans again are very few, while those who die as humans are reborn in hell are many. He took some soil, a bit of soil, onto his fingertip and compared, asked the monks, what is more, the soil of the earth or what I have on my fingertips? The monk said, what is on the fingertip is incomparable to the whole mass of soil you find on the earth. So likewise, just as the soil on the earth, that much of people are born in what? In the hell worlds. Whereas very few are reborn again in the human world. In Manussa Chuti Sutta, Nireya Chuti Sutta, Devata Chuti Sutta, in these suttas Buddha discussed again. In the Devata Chuti Sutta, Buddha discussed that the Devas who living among Devas, even when they pass away, it's the same. Only very few, a negligible amount, are reborn among humans. The majority are born in the hell worlds. With regard to the hell, again, the majority are born in the hell, only a few pass on to the Devas world. Because once you are born in the hell worlds, it is not easy to have a good rebirth. So if you believe in this, because these are the words of the Buddha, this is his realization, that is what we call Shraddha, having confidence in the Buddha. And then if we are fortunate, say, to realize the Dhamma, now we talked about these 4 qualities, no? To have this steadfast confidence in the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha, the virtue near to noble ones, then what happens? Then you become a stream entrant. And Buddha once said, monks, suppose a person was to place 7 clay balls the size of jujube seeds on the great earth. What do you think, monks? Which is more, the 7 clay balls the size of jujube seeds or the great earth? You take, like, say, small rocks, 7 rocks, and compare it to the earth. What is more? It's incomparable, no? The mass of the earth. Likewise, here monk says, Buddha, the great earth is certainly more. The 7 clay balls size of jujube seeds are tiny compared to the great earth, and they don't count. There is no comparison. They are not worth fraction. In the same, for a noble disciple, if he has become a stream entrant, the suffering he has, there is left for him to endure in the journey is like that small 7 jujube seeds. He has freed himself from the suffering as the whole mass of the earth. That much of suffering you have expended when you become a stream entrant. Why? When you become a stream entrant, you will fare on to a maximum of only 7 lives. Before that, you will attain Nibbana. That's a guarantee. And Buddha again in another simile, he said, he took a few drops of water from the ocean and asked the monks, what is more, the few drops of water I have in my hand or the water in the 4 great oceans? Can you compare this? It's incomparable, no? And Buddha said, monks, if you become a stream entrant, a Sotapanna disciple, then what is left for you to suffer, the suffering is just like this few drops of water in my hand. The suffering you have freed yourself from is like the waters of the 4 great oceans. So this is the words of the Buddha. So in this way, we have to understand this samsaric journey it's filled with suffering. There's no respite. And this is a very rare chance and opportunity we have got ourselves to develop the path, the noble path shown by the Buddha. So at least if you become a stream mentor, then you are okay. That is why Buddha said, no, in one simile, he said, monks, if a person comes to you and said, I will strike you 100 spears in the morning. And again in the noon time, you will be stricken by 100 spears. Again at night time also, I will strike you with 100 spears. So is this a bearable pain? Think even the mosquito when it stings, can you bear? Difficult. And in this manner, so 300 spears per day. You are struck by spears in this manner for 100 years. And if that person say, by this way, if you become a stream entrant, then happily accept that fate. Be willing to accept those 300 spears each day, every day for 100 years. Why? There's that guarantee that you become a stream entrant. The Buddha, imagine the Buddha is the most compassionate being, but he's telling you to say yes to being struck by these spears for 100 years. Why? Because he knows there's more suffering for you to bear if you do not achieve at least the fruition of stream entry. That is there because this is a samsaric journey, the woeful journey in the samsara. Because the Buddha sees what happens to these beings as they fare on from one life to the other. We don't see that. That is why we always see the pleasure in the things we come across in the world. Because of our ignorance, we are drawn to the pleasurable things we see here, experience in this life. And that moment, because of that ignorance, we fail to see this. We forget all this. We lose sight of the bigger picture. And we try to derive pleasure, a momentary pleasure, a passing pleasure. That is what we call ignorance. Because when you see a form, ignorance is there. It's always there. Avidya is there. When you hear a sound, taste, come to into present touch, contact, think thoughts, there is ignorance. That is why Buddha said, covered by ignorance and fettered by cravings, we wander in the samsara. So if we believe in these words of the Buddha, then we have a chance to free ourselves on this journey. So likewise, there are many suttas. I only picked a few. And there's sutta, a lotus pond. And here Buddha says, monk, suppose there was a lotus pond that was 50 leagues long, 50 leagues wide, 50 leagues deep, full to the brim, so how crow would drink from it, then a person would pick up some water on the tip of blade of grass. What do you think, Mendicus? Which is more, the water on the tip of the blade of grass or the water in the lotus pond? So that's very negligible amount, no, on the tip of the grass. So in this way, if you realize the fruition of stream entry, there is a very wee bit of suffering left for you to bear in this samsaric journey. So that is why we should strive to practice the noble path and at least achieve the fruition of stream entry. So, Buddha, when he said, that is why he always instructed us to do the good, to refrain from doing evil things, because he saw, because when you commit bad things by body, speech and mind, then you are reborn in these four bad destinations and then you suffer. So if you take the teachings of the Buddha also as a whole, there is a certain goal and objective in the teachings. The first step or the first objective of the Buddha is for beings to free the beings from the 4 bad destinations. That is the first objective. Second step or second objective of the Buddha is to give a rebirth in a good destination, to help you to be reborn in the Devas world or the Brahma world. That is second objective. Third step, the objective is to help you to attain the fruits of the path. So you can gradually put an end to this samsaric journey. So these are the objectives. It is in with these three objectives in mind that Buddha taught each and every sutta. To free you from the 4 bad destinations, to stop you from being reborn there, and to give you a rebirth in the heavenly world, the Brahma world, and ensure that you attain fruits of the path. So then the first thing we have to do is to make sure that we are not born where? The 4 bad destinations. That is why Buddha told us not to do that, not to do this. Likewise, then the basics comes into play. What are the basics? The precepts. Buddha told us to restrain our actions by body, speech, and mind. With these precepts, you get the chance to do what? What does the precepts help you do? What is the idea of keeping the precepts? Anyone?
The precepts help control your body, speech, and mind. So, in a way, it helps kind of reduce some of the defilements that you would gain.
Yeah, it's correct to some extent. But does virtue help you to restrain your mind? The precepts, I mean. If you keep the precepts helps you to restrain your actions by body and speech, not the mind. What should you do with regard to the mind? You know, that the precepts are easy in a way, how to be mindful of what goes on your mind, how to approach that problem, because there are many unwholesome thoughts that crop up in the mind, they rise in the mind out of nowhere. What do you do with those? How do you deal with that?
Bhavana,
Sorry?
Savinams.
Meditation. Actually, meditation helps you to develop 2 things. One thing, with meditation, you practice meditation in 2 ways, samatha and vipassana, calm and insight meditation, by which you develop what? What do you
Mindfulness.
develop? Sorry?
Mindfulness.
Yeah, ultimately, through concentration, what do you do? You develop wisdom. That's the idea of meditation. Because Buddha said in the Dhammapada, specifically he mentioned, samatha and vipassana, calm and insight meditation is the way to develop wisdom. If you do not engage in this path, it help you to develop wisdom. That means if you do not engage in meditation, if you do not apply yourself in calm and insight meditation, what happens? The opposite is true. Your wisdom declines. So if you engage in meditation, your wisdom grows. If not, it declines. So wisdom is the tool by which you deal with the unwholesome thoughts that crop up in your mind. Paññānaṁ dissa dissa pahatabba. With wisdom, you see and understand mindfully, this is jealousy, this is anger, this is lust, this is arrogance. All these unwholesome states that crop up in your mind, you discern them, you recognize them with wisdom, and you abandon with mindfulness and effort. That's how you purify your mind. So it is the basis, the precepts, of course. Having based yourself on precepts, if you are not virtuous, then you can't attain right mindfulness. Samadhi, right concentration, you can't achieve unless you keep the precepts. Once you are keeping the precept, then you practice samatha vipassana, then you develop wisdom by which you can purify your mind. So the beginning is the precepts. That is why Buddha said, you have to uphold the precept to save yourself from the bad destinations. That's the beginning. In the Apaya Sangathanika Sutta, that means the things that are conducive to bring about rebirth in the bad destinations. Are you familiar with that sutta? In that sutta, Buddha said, bhikkhus or monks, the destruction of life, taking of life, repeatedly pursued, developed and cultivated, is conducive to hell, to the animal realm, and to the ghost world. For one reborn as a human being, the destruction of life at minimum conduces to a short lifespan. If a person repeatedly kills living beings, what is the result? What will happen to him? He will be reborn in the hell worlds, in the animal worlds, in the ghost world. And the residue of the karma is still there. The residue, when he once reborn, now he will, the karma he will have to suffer in the hell world. And once one day he is reborn in the human world, the residue of the karma will come to effect. That is why Buddha here says, for one reborn as a human being, the destruction of life at minimum conditions to short lifespan. That is why some people die prematurely because they have killed, they have taken life in the past lives. Therefore, that is why Buddha asks you to refrain from killing living beings so that you will not be born in the bad destination. Next, Buddha says in the sutta, taking what is not given or stealing when it is repeatedly pursued, a person engaged it a lot, developed and cultivated, is conditioned to the hell, to the animal realm and the ghost world. For one reborn as a human being taking what is not given, at minimum, what will make him happen? What will happen to him? He will lose wealth. You have to believe in this, that if you steal, I will be born in hell. Then if you are born in the human world, that will cause you to lose your wealth. Because overnight people lose their wealth. They don't know their property have been stolen. Because a person may draw a deed, no, a wrongful deed, and your property can be stolen. And you don't know, in the next day you find yourself on the pavement. Why does this happen to people? Overnight your premises, your business, all things can go up in fire. That's because in past life you have stolen. So then you lose your property and wealth. And Buddha also said, if a person engages in sexual misconduct over and over again, then that is also conducive to birth in hell and the animal world, in the ghost world. And if you are born in the human world, what is the residue of the karma when it comes to effect? What is the minimum result of it? Anyone?
Like a bad family life. So like sometimes like divorces and other family problems, like lots of those kinds of things.
Yeah, that is one aspect of it. And in this sutta, Buddha said, enmity and rivalry. You have become the target of enmity and rivalry. You will have many enemies. When you engage in sexual misconduct, you are creating a lot of discord among people. No, if it is a couple, by engaging in sexual misconduct with that husband or wife of another, then you are creating discord, anger, among those two. So what you give, you get back. And you become the target of anger, enmity, and rivalry as a result in the samsara. That's how it works. So likewise, now when you say, now there is a pandemic, no? The COVID pandemic. So now if you on a daily basis, if you chant Paritta, chant Ratana Sutta, and you wish for all the beings to be well and happy, you wish for their well-being, and you practice loving kindness, spread loving kindness toward them. And if one day you contract the virus, what happens to you? Because you have had this good mindset of spreading loving kindness and wishing health on others, no? Health and well-being. You will get cured quickly. Why? Because what you wish, you get back. You will not suffer. Even if you were to contract by the virus, you will not suffer. It will be mild at the same time. Because what you give, you get. That's the nature of the karma. So that is something you can practice, loving kindness, and wish the beings of the world, may they be well and happy, may they have good health, not be affected from this virus. So that's the nature of karma. And fourth is false speech. Okay? If you engage in false speech, what happens? There goes again, you'll be born in hell world, ghost world. And what is the residue of that? The karma. If you engage in false speech, minimum.
People won't
what is the
trust
minimum
you
karma?
one day.
You become the target of false accusations.
Also, okay. Yes.
Okay, if you lie, if you speak falsely, then in the human world, you will be the target of false accusation. And next is divisive speech. If you engage in divisive speech, again, that is conducive to birth in the hell worlds, bad destination. If you are born in the human world, then what happens? You will lose friendships. Friends will leave you, because divisive speech means you divide people. You break up friendships. As a result, you lose your friends. And next, harsh speech is again conducive to birth in the bad destinations. And what is the result when you are born a human? You will not hear endurable speech. You will be scolded. Because what you, as you sow, so shall you reap. You will not have endearing, loving, kind words. You will not hear. You will all be shouted upon. Disagreeable speech is what you will get. Then if you engage in idle chatter, when it is repeatedly pursued, what happens? Idle chatter. Something we do, no? Most often. We are prone to idle chatter, no? What is the result? That also is conducive to birth in the hell worlds, if repeatedly pursued. Because there is, like, we think, we compare loving kind, killing living beings to idle chatter? Do we weigh it the same way, in the same gravity? No. We take it lightly, no? But the karma is the same. Karma is the same. That means it's the same as repeatedly killing living beings to repeatedly pursue idle chatter. What happens? Buddha said, if you repeatedly pursue and develop and cultivate idle chatter, you will be born in the hell world, the animal world, the ghost world. So it should not be taken lightly. And what happens when you are born among humans? Born among humans, what happens? Sorry? Yeah, what happens is your words would not have value. So what happened? Your words use value means people will not trust your words, because you have been speaking idly. Your words have no value, and as a result, people will not trust your words. They will not pay heed to your words. Or if you engage in drinking, like when like then you have, in this way you have to understand to have the same weight for all this. Now, today I was thinking in the morning, it just came into my mind, like, you know, the 5 heinous acts. What are the 5 heinous acts? Can you tell me? Anyone?
Killing of one's mother,
Yeah.
killing of one's father,
Father, mother,
killing of an arahant,
arahant.
shedding of blood of the Buddha,
Yes.
and dividing the Mahasangha.
Yeah. Creating schism among the Sangha. Division among the Sangha. And then I was thinking, now we compare it. So the killing an arahant, shedding the blood of the Buddha is the same. The karma is what is the result of this karma? You will be born straight away in the hell, for an eon's time. So if you were to kill your mother, kill your father, killing an arahant, it's the same. Shedding the life of the Buddha. So killing your mother is the same as killing an arahant or shedding the blood of the Buddha. So imagine how you should treat your father and mother. How much respect you should show to your father and mother. This is something we have to think of again and again, how we conduct with regard to your father and mother, because that karma you create is very, very powerful. Even how the way you speak, the way you conduct when you are with them, how you treat them, because they are very special. They have to be treated respectfully, with a lot of respect. Buddha said, that is why Buddha said, if you were to keep your father and mother on your shoulders and attend to them for 100 years, still you are in debt to them. All of us are in debt to our parents because we are all sons and daughters of parents. We all have parents. So having them on your shoulders means that they would urinate, excrete, all that happens on your shoulders. And you do that for 100 years, attending to them, keeping them on your soul. Still you are in debt. So think how special they are. It certainly struck me, like thinking of these 5 heinous acts, and it came to my mind like parents are very, very special. That is why Buddha said, in the mundane right to you means, having mundane right to you means, mother, believe in that mother is a special person, father is a special person, to have that belief. So see whether you have that belief. So that is some quality, that quality you have to develop within you. If you attend to your father and mother in a proper manner, you can accrue a lot of merit. That is that would help you to have a good rebirth. Similarly, if you scold them, if you engage in like say, if you ill-treat them, misbehave with them, then very powerful bad karma is created. And that is something every one of us should keep in mind, because we all have parents. And drinking liquor repeatedly should develop. What happens? You will be born among the 4 bad destinations. And when you are reborn, you become mad, no? You will not have mindfulness in this life. You will be retarded. That is the result of that karma. So in this way, Buddha asked us to refrain from this. Then he gave protection so that we can have a birth in the heavenly world. So that is why he taught us like this Devapada Sutta. That means to have confidence in the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, and practice virtue, the precept, then you can be born in the heavenly worlds. And he told us to practice Devatanussati, to contemplate upon the qualities of the Devas. No? Do you know how to practice Devatanussati? What does it mean to practice Devatanussati, contemplate upon the Devas? How do you do that? Buddha said that these devas, they are reborn in the heavenly worlds because of these 5 qualities that they have. What are those 5? Shraddha, confidence, virtue, Dhamma knowledge, generosity, and wisdom. These 5 things the devas have the same qualities. Those very same qualities I have also within myself. So in that regard, I am equal and I am worthy to be born among the devas. So contemplating in this manner and fostering these 5 qualities will help you to have a rebirth among the heavenly worlds. So in this way, we have to gradually try to grow in confidence in the Buddha Dhamma Sangha as we learn in the Devapada Sutta. So we discussed now a bit about Buddha's realization, the samsaric journey, and the necessity to have steadfast confidence in the Buddha. So you have to have an idea of each of these qualities. You know, one is Buddha is an arahant. No? What does it mean to have arahant? It means arahant means Buddha is free of all the defilements, greed, anger, and delusion. That is why we call Buddha is an arahant. Then he is a Samma Sambuddha. Samma Sambuddha means he is a perfectly self-enlightened. That no one taught him the path. No one taught him the manner to realize the Four Noble Truths. He found the path on his own. So he gained complete realization without the aid of a teacher. So that is why Buddha said in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, when he realized the Dhamma, he said, monks, in regard to these things, the suffering, the cause of suffering, the cessation of suffering, the path leading to the cessation of suffering, there arose in me vision, knowledge, wisdom, true knowledge and light, unheard of before. So that knowledge and that vision Buddha gained upon enlightenment is something unheard of before the Buddha. That is why he is called a Samma Sambuddha, a perfectly self-enlightened being. And in the same sutta, Buddha went on to say, so long because as my knowledge and vision of these Four Noble Truths as they really are in their 3 phases and 12 aspects was not thoroughly purified in this way, I did not claim to be a Samma Sambuddha, a unsurpassed perfect enlightenment in this world with Devas and Maras and Brahmas. It is only after Buddha gained this realization that he proclaimed himself as a Samma Sambuddha. And he said, then, unshakable is the liberation of my mind. This is my last birth. Now there is no more renewed existence. So because he realized it for the first time, because he realized with Pubbē Nivāsanussati Ñāna, the past lives he has come and how beings pass away and reborn. And when he realized by eradicating all the taints, the fetters, the defilements, he realized there is no rebirth for me. This is my last birth. And then Buddha in the same sutta, Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, he went on to say, and when the wheel of the Dhamma has been set in motion by the Blessed One, then the earth-dwelling devas raised a cry. What was the cry? At Varanasi in the deer park at Isipatana, the unsurpassed wheel of Dhamma has been set in motion by the Blessed One. And once it is set in motion, no one can stop it, which cannot be stopped by any ascetic or Brahmin or Deva or Mara or Brahma or by anyone in the world. Because this is something only a Samma Sambuddha does. Only a perfectly self-enlightened being can set in motion the wheel of the Dhamma. Pacceka Buddha, though he realizes the Dhamma, he cannot turn the wheel. That is done by only a Samma Sambuddha. So then, having heard the cry of the earth-dwelling devas, the devas in the Chatu Maharajika, Tavatimsa, Yama, the Tavatimsa, Tusita Nimarati, likewise, all the devas, they made the same cry. That is the enlightenment of the Buddha. So in this way, if you realize and understand the teachings of the Buddha, that means you see the Buddha. That is the only way you can see the Buddha, through his teachings. When you read the suttas, it is like the Buddha is talking to you. And when you understand this Dhamma gradually, then you can realize for yourself, this is the nature of the Buddha. Then you can realize his qualities. And then you get this picture. This is the teacher to whom I have gone for refuge. That is why we have to again and again study the teachings of the Buddha. Because he has taught us marvelous things, things we have not ever heard of, things we will not read in any other book in this world. Because they are all genuine. They are all unique. Because he taught us some other thing, that the 4 bases of spiritual power he taught. He once said, monks, these 4 bases of spiritual power, when developed and cultivated, lead to going beyond from this near shore to the far shore. Buddha said, monks, if you practice these 4 bases of spiritual power, it will help you to go from this near shore to the far shore. What is the near shore? Is the samsaric journey that we are all in. That is the near shore. What is the far shore? Far shore is where the Arahants dwell. They have crossed over the stream. And they are free of all the suffering, because the danger is in the near shore, where we are. If we get to the other shore, the far shore, we are free. So, how do you do that? You do that with these 4 bases of spiritual power. What are those? Chanda, Chitta, Virya, Vimansa. Have you heard that? Irdipada. Irdipada, in English we say the 4 bases for spiritual power. In the sutta, it is described in this here, monks, a monk develops the basis for spiritual powers that possesses concentration due to desire and volitional formations of striving. Basically, it means you have desire to practice, desire to develop the noble path, practice concentration, and arise effort. You do all that based on what? Your desire. That is the first quality. First base of spiritual, base for spiritual power. Second, what is it? What is second base?
Chanda Virya,
Virya, energy. No? He develops the basis for spiritual power that possesses concentration due to energy and volitional formations of striving. So energy, based on energy, he develops concentration and strive to realize the teachings. And he develops the basis for spiritual power with determination. You have to have determination to practice the path. So desire, energy, determination, then what? Chanda, Virya,
wise consideration.
Yeah.
Vimansa.
Vimansa. Wise consideration has to be there. So it is with these 4 bases of spiritual power. If you don't have these 4, you can't practice the Noble Eightfold Path. Period. So each and every one of, we have a desire, no? Now that is why we are here, to learn the teachings. And there has to be an effort to focus on this. And you have to be determined to be here for 1 hour, 2 hours, throughout the day actually, and to uphold the precepts. That takes determination. That takes desire, effort. And there has to be wisdom all the time. Wise consideration has to be there. It is with wisdom you control your emotions. There are the urges to live a normal day, no? To listen to music, eat and dine when you choose. Do all the things you do on a routine day. The urge is there. But today you don't do that. You restrain yourself. There comes into play these things. The 4 bases for spiritual power. It is one day when we develop this fully that we become an Arahant. In an Arahant, this 4 bases of spiritual power is fulfilled. When it say in the Buddha, because Buddha had completed the 4 bases of spiritual power, Buddha said, I can even live for 120 hours. In the Parinibbana Sutta, he said to Ananda Sayanga, I could even, if Ananda, because I have fulfilled the 4 bases for spiritual power, I could even live on to 120 years. But Ananda Sayanga forgot to invite the Buddha, make the invitation, no? Or else he would have lived for 120 years. He could have. Why? Because he had perfected the 4 bases for spiritual power. So here it's an Ananda, for whoever that have developed, cultivated the 4 bases for psychic power, made them a vehicle, made them a basis, stabilized them, exercised himself in them, and fully perfected them, could, if he so wished, live on for the eon, for even a bit more. Tathagata Ananda is such a person. So not only Buddha taught these things, he had himself perfected this. Have you heard the Sumedha Therigatha? You know that there's a book of the Lok Sayangans, you know, Voice of the Enlightened Monks. In that book you find the Sumedha Therigatha. They are very beautiful, and if you read those, you can understand how she, even as a lay person, being a disciple of the Buddha, had the 4 bases of spiritual power. I read you a few stanzas. In that Sumedha Therigatha, you can see her desire and determination to practice the noble path, the teachings. She was supposed to be given in marriage, to be married to a king, King Anika Datta. And she was from a lord's family, a daughter of a lord, and she was to be married to this king, a young king, Anika Datta. So mother tells her, once you become the wife of King Anika Datta, you will be the chief queen. So mother is telling Sumedha, but oh daughter, protecting precepts, living a celibate life and being a nun are difficult things to do. So she wants to live a nun's life. Her parents want her to marry the king and live a life of sensual pleasures. Because she says the mother, protecting precepts, living a celibate life and being a nun are difficult things to do. So then she, and mother goes on to say, with royal power you will be able to give orders. You will have authority over the family and wealth. All the enjoyments in the palace will be yours. Daughter, you are still young. Enjoy sensual pleasures and let your marriage take place. Then Sumedha spoke to her parents, mother and father. I don't need anything that's part of this substantial existence. Either I will become a nun or die. See her determination. There will be no marriage. So she has a firm resolution. This impure body is filthy. Now see wise consideration. Another basis for spiritual power. This impure body is filthy, foul smelling, frightful, a heap of disgusting things, always oozing, and is like a bag filled with excrement. How can I enjoy such a filthy body? She was very beautiful, Sumedha. A real delight to the eyes, but this is how she saw her body. This body smeared with flesh and blood is repulsive. I have realized the true nature of this body. It is a resort for worms and food for vultures and other birds. To whom should I give such a body in marriage? See how beautiful, how transcending her thought process is, no? In the cemetery, this body will become food for dogs and wolves. After having thrown away this body in the cemetery, the mother and father of that person, disgusted with the dead body, bathe themselves. This is the unfortunate destiny of everybody. Isn't that true? Still people, after they go to a funeral, they come home even now, no? And you clean yourself up. Don't you do that? Because you have that feeling that you have been to a place where the hygiene is not that much, no? Because why? That foulness is there. We feel that. The body is bound together with bones and tendons. It is filled with saliva, tears, excrement, and urine. But foolish people are attached to the body. So we also have the same body. But we overlook this. We don't use our wisdom. We do not investigate with wisdom the reality. Rather, we see the surface. And we get deluded with the body. If anyone dissecting it were to turn this body inside out, even one's own mother, being unable to bear the foul smell of it, would be disgusted. Is this true or not? It's true, no? It is true. But just seeing a body dissected, like doctors use it on an operating table, on a daily basis, they see the body, dissected. And who actually, the coroners, they see the body. But does they get disenchanted of the body? No. Just seeing with the eyes is not enough. When Buddha said, Dhamma is opanayika, come and see, what did he mean there? Opanayika means come and see with wisdom. There are two ways of seeing things, by your eyes, the naked eyes, and seeing with wisdom. So doctors, they see dissected bodies on the operating table on a daily basis, but they don't get disenchanted. Do they get rid of their lust? No. Why? The wisdom, the investigative wisdom is not there. So even in our case, if we do not train our wisdom, develop our wisdom to see the reality of the body, we will not go beyond this delusion about the body. I am reflecting on the true nature of the 5 groups of clinging, the 4 elements, the 6 sense bases, things dependently arisen, and the suffering arisen from birth. While reflecting in this way, how can I wish for marriage? There are many verses in the Sumedha Theragatha. I thought after reading this, like for a person to arouse effort, it is the perfect Theragatha to read again and again, because you can imagine even in the layperson how thoroughly he studied the Dhamma. Because all the similes Buddha has told about the samsaric journey, about becoming a stream-entered, all that he says in the Therigatha. And it's a very nice montage of many suttas. In one Therigatha, you find a lot of content that if you can read that Therigatha again and again, it will help you to arouse much effort to practice and to gain your knowledge in the Dhamma, to improve your knowledge in the Dhamma. You could clearly see how he had committed to memory content from each of the suttas. It was very nice. As a layperson even. So Sumedha, not delighting in the conditioned world, spoke in this way. So there are many more verses. I am just telling a few. So in this way, delighted in the conditioned world, spoke in this way, getting the attention of King Anikada. So the king also came, that mother and father is talking, getting her ready to give in hand in marriage to the king. And the king, the young king also arrived at their home. And getting the attention of King Anikadatta, she threw her cut hair on the, she cut her hair and threw it on the floor in front of the King Anikadatta. So the King Anikadatta stood, because before that she tells many things of the dangers of sensual pleasures and all that, foulness of the body, many verses are there. And she did this, cut her hair and put it on at his feet and said, the King Anikadatta, he was shaken. He stood up with joined hands, worshipping Sumedha's father. The king is now worshipping the father and begged him, let Sumedha become a nun. May she attain the unshakable liberation, the normal truth. Because they saw, the king saw her desire, her determination, her wisdom. So then only the mother and father came to their senses. Her mother and father let her go. Frightened by sorrow and fear, Sumedha became a nun. She attained the 6 supernormal knowledges while she was practicing the path as a trainee nun. She attained the highest goal of liberation. She became an Arahant. So very beautiful. She was able to do that because of what? The 4 bases for spiritual power. Taught by whom? The Gautama Buddha. So that is why we should believe in the teachings of the Buddha. Grow in confidence in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. This is the Sangha, the Arahants, who realized the path, the attainments, the fruits of the path. And Buddha encouraged us to learn the Dhamma well. He said, amongst those teachings which I have discovered and proclaimed should be thoroughly learned by you, he said, practiced and developed and cultivated by you, so that this spiritual life, the path to Nibbana, may endure for a long time, so that it may be for the welfare of the multitude, for the happiness of the multitude, out of compassion for the world, for the good welfare and the happiness of devas and humans. If you want to do good for the world at large and yourself, then what you have to do? You have to learn the Dhamma. Then only the Dhamma will live on in you. That is why Buddha asks us to develop and cultivate the Dhamma so that it lives long. So if you are a person who can do the words of the Buddha and make the Dhamma live long in yourself, how nice is that as a disciple of the Buddha? That is what it means to be a disciple of the Buddha. And Buddha says, and what are those teachings that I tell you to practice, learn? They are the 4 establishments of mindfulness, the 4 right strivings, the 4 bases for spiritual power, the 5 spiritual factors, the 5 powers, the 7 factors of enlightenment, the Noble Eightfold Path. These are the things you have to study again and again and learn by heart and practice, so that the Dhamma lives long in you. And you know, there's a quality of the Buddha that we now call Arhan, Samma Sambuddha, and Vijjacharana Sampanna. What does it mean, Vijjacharana Sampanna? Vijja is the knowledge. Charana is those knowledge, those embodied in his conduct. Just embodied, exemplified by his day-to-day conduct. Because knowledge is now, the knowledge means, the knowledge of the science, no? But is that something that is good for the human race? Does it surpass the mundane aspects of life? No, it doesn't. That is why the Buddha's knowledge is beyond the knowledge of the sciences. It's a noble knowledge. So the knowledge is realized, the Vijja of the Buddha is threefold. No? We call it Pubbē Nivāsānussati Jnāne, the knowledge of reflecting the past life, the Chutupapāta Jnāne, the knowledge of passing away and rebirth of beings. How did the Buddha explain the knowledge of recollection of past lives? When he had concentrated his mind, he said in this way, in my concentrated mind that was purified, bright and unblemished, rid of imperfection, malleable, wielded, steady and unattained, and attained to imperturbability, I directed it to knowledge of the recollection of past lives. I recollected my manifold past life. This is 1 birth, 2 births, 3 births, 4 births, likewise, up to hundreds of births. Buddha recollected thousands and 100,000s of births. And he said, I also recollected where I was born in many eons of world's destruction, where I was born in many eons of world evolution, where I was born in many eons of world destruction and evolutions. And he saw there I was so named of such a clan with such an appearance, such was my food, such my experience of pleasure and pain. Likewise, in detail, he could recollect all his past lives. That is the faculty to reflect the past lives of beings, himself or others. That is called Pubbē Nivāsānussati Jnāni. That is one knowledge of the Buddha. Then he also possessed, then he gave a simile for us to understand this faculty, this quality of the Buddha. Just as a man might go from his own village to another village, and from that village to yet another, then from that village back again to his own village, he might think then, in retrospect, he can think, I went from my own village to that village, and from that village to yet another, then from that village back again to my own village. In the same way, Buddha could recollect all his past life. Then the knowledge of the divine nine, Chutupapāta Jnāne, we say. Then again, with the purified, concentrated, malleable mind, Buddha, he could saw, he said, I saw beings passing away and being reborn, inferior and superior, fair and ugly, in good and bad destinations. I understood how beings pass on according to their actions. Thus, indeed, these beings who were ill-conducted in body, speech and mind, revilers of noble ones, wrong in their views, those who had taken up wrong views, on the dissolution of the body after death have been born in the hell worlds. He saw with his divine eye. And the ones who have lived life, a good life, he also saw them born in the heavenly worlds. And he gave this nice simile for us to understand that Chatupapada Jnana of the Buddha. Just as though at a crossroads, there were a building with an upper terrace and a man with keying sight, so it's storied building, and the topmost story, a man with keying sight standing there were to see people entering a house, leaving it, walking along the streets and sitting at the crossroads. He would think to himself, those people are entering the house, those are leaving it, those are walking along the street, and those are sitting at the crossroads. Likewise, Buddha saw beings fare on from one life to another, just like he could see that people moving from one house to another. That's a simile. Then the knowledge of the destruction of taints. So once he had concentrated his mind, developed his mind, when it was wieldy and steady, then he realized as it actually is, this is suffering. This is the origin of suffering. This is the cessation of the suffering. This is the path leading to the cessation of suffering. So in this way, then also Buddha realized as it really is, these are the taints. These are the origin of the taints. These are the cessation of the taints, and this is the way leading to the cessation of taints. And he gave the simile. What is the simile? Just as if there were a lake on a mountain top, clear, limpid, and undisturbed, so that a man with good sight standing on the bank could see shells, gravel, and pebbles, and also schools of fish swimming about and resting. So too I realized it actually as the Four Noble Truths, that the taints actually are, these are the taints, these are the origin, these are the cessation, and the way leading to the cessation of the taints. He could clearly see as if you were looking into a pond. So that is the three knowledges of the Buddha. Vijja Charana Sampanna, that is why he called the Buddha, because he had these knowledges. And there is this moment where Buddha, when he was in the human realm with his divine eye, he could see. Once he saw the thoughts of the Baka Brahma in the Baka Brahma Sutta, where Buddha instantly vanished from the human world. And he was reborn in the Brahman Baka's mansion, as I remember, yes. He was born there, he went there, actually with his spiritual powers, he vanished from the human world and he went there. Because so this is how it is in the sutta. Now at that time, Baka the Brahma had the following harmful misconception. He took up a wrong view. What is the wrong view? This is permanent. Because the Brahma world, there is a long lifespan. When you live long, you think you are permanent. You feel that. Because when your lifespan is so long, you think this is everlasting, this life. Because even now, that is how we also feel. We have only like 80 years to live, but we never think we'll die. That doesn't occur to us for some reason, because of ignorance. Think of a Brahma who is living for many years. In the Brahma world, there are eons of lifetimes at time in some Brahma world. So in this case, therefore, he got this front view. This is permanent. This is everlasting. He thought this is eternal. This is whole. This is imperishable. For this is where there is no being born, growing old, dying, passing away, or rebirth. And there is no other escape beyond this. He thought this was the eternal, everlasting place where there is no suffering. Why? There is no aging. There is no rebirth. Therefore, this is everlasting. That's what he thought. Then the Buddha, it says here, then the Buddha knew what Baka the Brahma was thinking. As easily as a thrown person would extend or contract their arm, he vanished from Jeta's grove and reappeared in the Brahma realm. Buddha instantly reappeared in the Brahma realm. Baka the Brahma saw the Buddha coming off in the distance and said to him, "Come, good sir, welcome, good sir. It's been a long time since you took the opportunity to come here." So he thought Buddha is also coming here because this is the everlasting place, the final resort. So Buddha also coming there. For this is permanent, this is everlasting, this is eternal, this is complete, this is imperishable, he said. For this is where there is no being born, growing old or dying. So therefore there is no suffering. When he had spoken, the Buddha said to him, alas, Baka, the Brahma is lost in ignorance. You are deluded, he said. Alas, Baka, the Brahma is lost in ignorance. Because what is actually impermanent, not lasting, transient and incomplete and perishable, he says is permanent, everlasting, eternal, complete and imperishable. And where there is being born, growing old, dying, all this, you say it is not there. You are so misled, he said. You are sadly mistaken. Then the Brahma says, Gautama, we 72 merit makers are now wielders of power. So there are 72 of them, himself and the entourage of Brahma. Having passed beyond rebirth and old age, this is our last rebirth as Brahma, knowledge master, and now many people pray to us. So many people pray and pay respect to us, look up to us, because we are everlasting. Then Buddha said, but Baka, the lifespan here is short, not long, said the Buddha. Though you think it's long, I know that your lifespan is too. There is a word here, it's called quinquadecillion years. Quinquadecillion years, whatever that is. So in Pali, it is a Nirabbuddha Laksha, 100,000 Nirabbuddha. So in a way, you can't, it's very difficult to give a number there. So that much of years you can live, Buddha said. That is the lifespan. Blessed one, I am the one of infinite vision. Now the Brahma says, Blessed one, I am the one of infinite vision, who has gone beyond rebirth and old age and sorrow. What precepts and observances did I practice in the past? Explain to me so I can understand. So the Brahma is asking of the Buddha his life, past life. What have I done to be born as the Baka Brahma? Then Buddha tells him, you gave drink to many people who were oppressed by thirst and heat. So he had given refreshments, to people who were oppressed by thirst and heat. There are the precepts and observances you practiced in the past. I recollect it like one who has awakened from sleep. So just like that, Buddha knew what he had done in the past merits easily. And he also says, when people at Deer River bank were seized, you released the captives as they were led away. So he had also released some people when they were caught, when they were dwelling by a river bank. He had released some people from their captives. That's the precepts and observance you practiced in the past. I recollect it like one who has awakened from sleep. Then Buddha again says of another meritorious deed done by the Brahma. When a boat on the Ganges river was seized by a fierce Naga desiring human flesh, you freed it wielding mighty force. That's the precepts, and because in that life, I think he was an ascetic, this Baka Brahma, and he was able to free these people from a serpent, a Naga. In this way, he saved their lives. So that also helped him to have a good birth in the Baka Brahma world. And Buddha said, I used to be a servant named Kappa. So at that time, Buddha had been a servant in a past life of this Brahma. His name was Kappa. At that time, I thought you were intelligent and loyal. So then Buddha goes on to say, you certainly then Brahma realized that he was wrong. Because now Buddha knew his lifespan in this Brahma world and what he had done in the past to have this good rebirth, all this. You certainly understand this lifespan of mine and others too, That's why you are the Buddha. And that's why your blazing glory lights up even the Brahma realm. So when the nature of the Buddha, when he goes to the Devas world, he is the most beautiful person there. He radiates light more than any Deva in the Devas world. He surpasses all the Devas. If the Buddha goes to the Brahma world, it's the same. There is no being, no Brahma who has more greater aura than the Buddha. Again, he is unsurpassed in beauty than any. It's the same in the human world. That is a another very unique quality of the Buddha. So in this way, Buddha's realization, his understanding of these worlds is incomparable, of his world and all the other worlds. Once Buddha said of the animal realm, Buddha said in one sutta, he said this animal realm is so diverse, isn't it? You know, think of the ocean alone, the diversity of the creatures, the fish. We have octopus, the sea-dwelling animals, think of them, octopus. We have the crabs are there. Then we have the lobsters. Then we have the tortoises. Very different, no? And when the deep sea, when you think of the deep sea, again the animals are far more different. And then think of the reptiles living there, and reptiles and other animals living on the ground who have 4 feet. Then there are the millipedes, because there's so much diversity. And then there are birds, various kinds of birds. And Buddha, in this way, he reflects upon the diversity of the animal world and went on to say, monks, this diversity that reflected in the animal world, the origin of this is in the mind. Because the mind is even more diverse. Because of that diversity of the mind, that they had accumulated diverse karma. And that diverse karma has borne fruit in the animal realm in this way. And therefore you have this diversity in the animal world. So the diversity in the animal world reflects the diversity of what? The minds of people. Because it is the people that are born as animals. Just think of if you have, say, you have seen aquariums, you have seen. And you think of an aquarium and all the fish, the difference of them. Even the same kind of fish, there are different colors, no? Why? Because the difference in the karma. So that is the nature. See the understanding of the Buddha. He saw all this, how complex the mind is, how complex the karma is. The whole setup is very complex. And he saw through all this complexity without the aid of any other, on his own. He found out the solution, the Noble Eightfold Path. No one taught him the path. No one had even heard of a path. Now we know Noble Eightfold Path, just like that we can say like parrots. Right view, right intention, right speech, right action. Why? We have been taught. But still we can't practice the path. We can't walk the path. It's difficult for us. Even after it has been taught to us over and over again. But Buddha on his own, he had to figure out the 8 aspects. There's such a thing as mundane right view, there is the super mundane right view, and these are the 10 aspects of this mundane right view. This is what it means to have right view, and this is right intention, this is right speech. He had to find it out, he had to develop it on his own and move forward in the path. That's why Buddha is called Sugata. He found out the noble path himself and trod it on his own, developed it on his own. How unbelievable, no? Unfathomable, like his wisdom, his ability, his skill. His nature of his mind is, he can't fathom. When he faced the Mara under that tree, under the Bodhi tree, there was no one there. No one, on his own. And his mind was not free of defilements. No. Even still, he could face the Mara. Even with the mind with defilements. Buddha was not even in a state of samadhi. It is only after he defeated the Mara that he went on to develop the jhanas and purify his mind. Before that, even then, his mind was so strong. Why? It was so very perfect, in the sense he had perfected the qualities needed to attaining enlightenment over the samsara. That is why the Buddha as a teacher is unique, because he has a history. Because to become a Buddha, you have to perfect certain qualities for many eons. No? for incalculable eons and 100,000 eons. You have to perfect this quality, then you are worthy of becoming Buddha. If of any other teacher, of any other religion, you don't get that history. He had done so and so to become this. It is because Buddha had perfected all this that he could that day under the Bodhi tree on his own face the Mara and his army and defeat them. Then he developed jhana and purified his mind, freed themselves from defilements. So how fortunate we are to go for refuge to such a person. So Sugato Lokavidu, he was the knower of all the verse. No, all the words. Like, there is a simile in Sinhala we say, Buddha saw the words like an atambulak. Atambulak means, there is a small nelly. I think in English also it's called nelly. Nelly fruit. It's a bitter fruit. It's a like bittersweet fruit. Shower fruit. So you keep it on your, it's very round and small. You keep it on your palm of your hand and you can see the whole world. Like just you can see that nelly fruit on your palm clearly. For Buddha, it was like the whole world was on his palm. Nothing was hidden. I think the English idiom you have to use there is like the back of your hand. You say, I know that like the back of my hand. So like the back of my hand, Buddha knew the world. Back of his hand, he knew the world. Nothing was hidden. Everything was revealing to the Buddha. So because his wisdom was so all-encompassing and boundless wisdom the Buddha had. So therefore his Lokavidu, Anuttara Purisa Dhammasari, and the tamer of all the beings to be tamed. He tamed with his teachings. Of course, he had spiritual powers. Because the Pratihara, there are 3 miracles, no? The miracle one is we call Adesana Pratihara. Buddha could look into a person's mind, read his thoughts and teach the Dhamma. Adesana Pratihara. Then we have the Irdhi Pratihara, what we call the miracle of spiritual power. But he valued most is Adesana Pratihara, Anusasana Pratihara, the teaching the Dhamma. He valued that the most, not to perform miracles or read others' mind. He used those so sometimes to tame certain beings, but mostly he taught the Dhamma. What did he taught at the Dhamma? The Four Noble Truths. Once Buddha said in many words and phrases, what I have taught is the Four Noble Truths. That is what monks I have taught you in many suttas, with many examples, with different phrasing, words. I have taught you the Four Noble Truths. So whatever sutta you study, you get this. There is suffering. There is a cause of suffering. This is the cessation and this is the path. The problem and the answer is given. It's up to you to practice on your own. Develop your confidence in the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha and practice your virtue. So then you have the word, the Devpiyavara, divine footsteps are there with you. And as a result, you will be born in the heavenly worlds. If you are born there, once you are born there, then you have the second chance to again associate with noble friends, devas who have actually practiced the teachings of the Buddha while in the time of the Buddha, as humans, as upasakas, disciples of the Buddha. So you get a second chance to learn the Dhamma, listen to the Dhamma, and comfortably practice. Because as you see, in the human world, there are so many obstacles, no? We don't know for how many years the pandemic would last. As it is, they say 2025, I think the WHO, but there's no guarantee. After that, something else will come to be, no? Do you have more time? There's another sutta I wanted to discuss because people are declining in qualities. And that in this quality, Adhammika Sutta, okay? I read this, it don't take much time. That means unprincipled. How people declining in qualities affect the environment even. Here Buddha said at a time when kings are unprincipled. That means kings do not practice the Dhamma. They do not live in accordance with the Dhamma. So they are unprincipled, immoral. So at a time when kings are unprincipled, royal officials become unprincipled. When royal officials are unprincipled, the Brahmins and householders become unprincipled. When Brahmins and householders are unprincipled, the people of town and country become unprincipled. When the people of town and country are unprincipled, the course of the moon and sun become erratic. The courses of the stars and constellations then become erratic. When the courses of the stars and constellations become erratic, the days and nights become erratic. When the days and nights become erratic, the months and fortnights become erratic. When the months and fortnights become erratic, the seasons and years become erratic. When the seasons and years become erratic, the blowing of the winds become erratic and chaotic. When the blowing of the winds become erratic and chaotic, the deities, the devas are angered. When the devas are angered, the heavens don't provide enough rain. When the heavens don't provide enough rain, the crops ripen erratically. When people eat crops that have ripened erratically, they become short-lived, ugly, weak, and sickly. And gradually they decline in lifespan, in quality. So likewise, when you lose qualities, so think of any, take any country, any leader, a political leader, a president, and think how moral they are, their qualities, and how that affects that country, and if it's world superpowers, how it affects the whole world. And you have these pandemics, cyclones, climate changes, global warming, all that is there. No rain, there will be famines even. So this is where it all lies. So that is why the teachings of the Buddha, this is the Buddha's realization. It's all this. So that is how we have to read the suttas, study them, and gradually grow in confidence toward the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. So we can actually see this Dhamma. It is Sandittika. In here, in this life, you can see these results, any of these. So may we all have the good fortune to grow in confidence toward the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, and practice the virtue dear to the noble ones, and develop the divine steps within us, and have a good rebirth in the heavenly worlds, and realize the Four Noble Truths in this Gautama Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.